Agora já está ligado, já deve ser. Posso-me sentar e vou-me levantar. Faltou só a espera do professor Beirão, onde é que ele anda? Computation Group. I work basically on travel, transportation, and land use research. But I do a lot of GIS analysis of the built environment, and that's what I'm here trying to show you today. Right? So this that I'm showing is was a project, an FCT project that we had that finished last year, involved 4 cities. And this was part of the reason why we developed this tool, is because we wanted a tool that everybody in different places could use the same tool, and the results could be duplicated. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's this relationship between built environment and travel, and then what are the determinants of travel, and how we measured it. Yeah? So basically, the literature tells us that we have this, what we call the 7 Ds. So when we want to explain why somebody travels, somebody's mobility, there are 7 Ds that explain. The first 3 Ds are the built environment Ds, so density, diversity, and design. And then we have 2 more that people tend to show us as a kind of additional dimensions of the built environment. I would argue they are not really strict built environment dimensions, so they're basically telling us something about the accessibility, how we perceive and the real accessibility to places, so to destinations or to transit. And then we have demand management. We were talking about politics, so like the cost of parking, is there parking there? Is it parking free or not? We have congestion charge, for instance, so there's things that are not strictly built environment when they have a strong relationship. And then, of course, demographics. Yeah? Demographics explains a lot. I must say this. If I'm rich, I have 2 cars in my family, I have young children to drive to school, so there's a lot of explanation coming from demographics. So what have we done? We have looked at this and tried to explain these relationships in medium-sized cities in Portugal. I must say that medium-sized cities in Portugal are in reality small cities. Yeah? So we call it medium-sized, but they are really small cities. And in a way, what we looked, and this is important for me, is that we try to organize these Ds that people tend to show us kind of if they were a list. And say, well, but there's relationships between them. And what we understood is that there's a key importance of accessibility. So accessibility, whatever we're going to measure it, depends on the built environment. So I know, for instance, if I have higher density, the accessibility is better by walking. If I have more diversity, like Fernand, he was telling us. So there's a relationship here from the built environment to accessibility. Accessibility is also shaped by the mobility management, for instance, the cost of parking or the congestion charge or whatever. And then this is going to explain travel or mobility as a whole. And then, of course, we have all these important other dimensions that are, in a way, correlated to the built environment. Demographics, we know that, for instance, rich people live in certain areas, poor people live in other areas, even if the built environment is the same, if we have the same density, for instance. So there's a kind of a correlation here. And we treat, that's why we put this red dotted here, is because, in a way, we treat this as covariates. So statistically speaking, we want to control for these variables and to understand the importance of the ones on top. Also, what we've done is that we look at how we're going to measure it. And normally, and this, I mean, maybe for you guys, it's going to be incredible. I have some friends that I told this, and they say, well, how is it possible? But normally, I'm going back, we look at these variables at the place where somebody lives. So let's see where Vitor lives. And I'm going to measure his density, diversity, design, and then we're going to see where I live, for instance, and my density, diversity, and design. But the problem is that the people are forgetting that we both come here. And so the importance, the destination is as important as the origin, and normally it's forgotten. Here in this project, we didn't forget that, and so we use this, what we call we didn't make up this model. This is a model from '93. It's called the behavioral model of the environment. And what it tells us is that when we want to understand the relationship between built environment and travel, we have to look at three different things. So where's the origin, what's the destination? What is the area, the characteristics of the area around it, and the characteristics of the route. The routes are very important when we study, for instance, walking, because it can be a short walk, but if we have a major highway to cross, for instance, it can be enough for somebody to decide not to walk and come by car or something. Okay, so this was our operational framework. We wanted to calculate the built environment characteristics for origins, destinations, areas around them, and the routes. I must say that in the end, we didn't end up measuring the routes because we didn't have data, but we wanted to. So this was our operational framework. And then we have this problem that I was discussing a little bit, common problems in geography. And this first is this predefined area. It's a part of the boundary problem that I was talking to you about. So the spatial analysis problems is that when we use predefined areas, for instance, this is a map of Santarém. This is Santarém. This is one of the cities we study. And these are blocks. So what we call in Portuguese, subsecção estatística, the smallest statistical unit. And we measure this, we get these areas, but if we had measured this with different areas, the result can be different. So it's a common problem in geography that we call the modifiable area unit problem. When you modify the area, you get different results. If you measure the same indicator, for instance, this is design something, I don't know what it is, it doesn't matter, it's just an example. For the parish, the result could be different. For the small, it's different. So normally, how do we fix this? We use floating catchment areas. That's the thing I was discussing with Stefano earlier. So, for instance, for this point, instead of saying the built environment of this house, we had a centroid for each building of each city. And instead of saying, well, we're going to measure a buffer around it, we measure in this case is just 500 meters, but we can change the value. And so what the GIS is going to give us is that it's going to calculate the real network that is available, that is accessible within 500 meters, and then we just draw the polygon. I must say this polygon drawing is a study in itself. There's a lots of different methods to. I'm not getting into it. We just use the standard algorithm in ArcGIS, right? So that we can be used anyway. So this is what we did. We used 500 meters. We wanted to measure walking accessibility. Why? Vitor is going to ask me, wow, why? Well, we tried a lot. We tried 200, 300, 400, 500, 6, 7, 8, 9, up until 1,200, I guess, 1 kilometer and 200 meters. And we looked at the indicators. And what happens is that when you get really big values, you start getting very homogeneous values for all the buildings. And when you get really small, it's the opposite. Sometimes you just need to have something, and then suddenly the thing pop-ups as if you had a really good accessibility. So this was a bit of trial and error, to be honest. And then looking at, talking with experts from these cities, looking at how people walked in these cities, we said, well, 500 meters is a common distance that people travel. And so that's why we decided to do 500 meters. At the same time, it's not 500 meters buffer. It will be very wider. So we said, okay, it's reasonable, but we can change. And so what have we done? We look at these 7Ds. Well, I forgot to say, from the 7Ds, 2 are not, we cannot measure. It's demographics that we measure as covariates, and demand management that we didn't measure. And my problem was, because we were 4 universities working 4 different cities, I said, well, I have to develop something that everybody's going to apply in their own. When I only had data for my city, between commas, it was Santarém, I had to develop a tool that they could apply in their own cities with their own data, and I could be assured that the results will be the same. Right? And so we end up doing a lot of research in terms of literature, indicators of the built environment, looking at the several dimensions, and we end up with 30 plus 5. What do I mean by that? Because 30, we measure it to everybody, to all buildings, and 5, we're just measuring for the predefined areas. We wanted to measure at 2 different levels. One for the floating catchment area of each building, and the other one for what we call the homogeneous areas that normally comes from plans. So they say, in an urban plan or something, they say this is a neighborhood, so something like that. So for instance, number of bus lines, we only measure for homogeneous area. Right? And well, you can go in more detail. It's all available online. I'm going to tell you in the end. So what have we done? And this is a way of, we use ArcGIS. Why? To be honest, I wanted to use Quantum GIS. I like more the open source thing. The problem is that often when you work, I'm giving you here, just a comment, a parenthesis, I'm giving you here also the real research problems that we face, yeah, not only the theoretical thing. So often the thing is that when we started, I said, okay, let's make a post-GIS database, everybody's accessible, we're going to put it online. Great, you do updates, and they say, well, David, you're speaking Chinese for me. I just know how to work with the ArcGIS. And, you know, even though ArcGIS, some people knew a little bit, some people were just very basic users of ArcGIS. But the problem is that, as you probably know, all the universities in Portugal have ArcGIS because Esri is very smart and they offer us the license. Yeah? So I said, okay, let's do with ArcGIS. It's not a problem. And so the thing is that I wanted to use the same formula for all buildings and to replicate in 4 different cities. That we're talking about 27,300 buildings that we had to calculate these points. And what did we choose? We chose a very simple solution that ArcGIS has, and as far as I know, Quantum GIS now is starting to implement a solution like that. I really became a fan, to be honest, that they call the model builder. Why is it good? Model builder has a good thing. When you work as a team, and maybe for some of you are going to work within a team, you can trace what the other person has done. For instance, say that I ask Stefano to do some kind of research, and you come with a result, and I say, well, this result is a bit strange. How did you get this result? And you forgot because you made, you know, this and then that, and then a shape, and then a buffer, and then a overlay and whatever. So in the I say, okay, just do it in model builder. So you put everything, it's like a trace, it's like migalhas, how do you say? Yeah, so you leave them behind you. And we can go back and see what have you done and what were the parameters that you used. And we can transform this into proper small scripts that you can give to everybody online. So we just used 3D analysis because we wanted to calculate slope, and a lot of network analysis because it's all about network analysis. And then some small scripts that in between you have to make. And we use Python. Somebody was talking about. Python is really good language, very easy, very close to English, something like this. So it's very easy to understand. And, you know, basic Visual Basic. And so in the end, what we've done, and I'm showing you today, is that we've built toolboxes that we call it built environment. They're available online. You can download it and for free and install in your ArcGIS. That calculates all of these different types of indicators, the 30 plus 5 indicators. So in a way, what's behind it is something like this, quite complex, but what the user sees is a common basic window to say, for instance, where's your pedestrian network, which size of the floating catchment area do you want to use. It's written 500, but you can change and put 200 and 600, whatever. Where are your buildings? Where is your output geo database? So where you want to save your results? What's the feature name and the number of activities? For instance, in this case, he's going to search for the number of activities that are within 500 meters. Yeah. So it's just an example of the diversity toolbox. So this diversity, for instance, calculates you 4 indicators. They can be, this is a small area of Santarém. We give this data as well for people to try if they want to install and try to see how it's going to work. So if you do everything correct, you should get a map like this. You see, in a way, I say, well, if everything is correct, you should do a map like this. Now apply to your map. And what happens is he adds 4 columns with the values calculated. Yeah. So it's very, in a way, simple and basic, but very powerful because it allows you to, well, nowadays, if I want to calculate this for Torino, I can go and use it. Yeah, very, very basic. So I think it's a good thing that in universities that often we repeat stuff, and I hate to repeat stuff. So with this, I go back and do it again without having a problem. So it gives maps like this. This is Santarém, just for an example. Percentage of area occupied. I'm not representing the road center line, just the buildings, but just for clarity of results. Yeah. So of course we have here the road center line. So for instance, percentage of area occupied by activities within 500 meters, public facilities area, number of square kilometers, or distance between intersections, so a common topological measure that we were talking on the way here. So the average size of the block, or frequency of public transport. Okay, why did you use this? Why do we wanted this? We use this for different things. Now I'm gonna speak of other things besides GIS and analysis. One of them is that we wanted to try to see if it was possible to make these homogeneous areas that people normally speak about. When we talk with planners, so I come from a planning background, and they say, they want to make lines, right? And they say, this is the city center, and these are the rules. This is the building, this is the neighborhood X, and the rules are this. You can only have this density, whatever. So we wanted to make a kind of what we call the morpho-functional neighborhoods. So in a kind of a semi-automatic way, understand common morphological and functional things. And so what we did is very basic statistics on purpose, so that people understand what we're doing. We just made factor analysis to try to combine all these indicators. We end up with 5 factors, I guess. Yeah, 5 factors. And then from the factors itself, we made groups. Yeah? So groups of neighborhoods. We presented this to the city center, to the city council, sorry. And they were like, okay, this can be useful. They are doing their PDM at the moment, the master plan. So they said that this can be useful. Other things that we did was like we entered to statistics. I like a lot this. I don't know if you ever any of you know about structural equation modeling, but structural equation modeling for you guys that do linear regression, great. This is linear regression with factorial analysis at the same time. So what you see here are indicators that we measure. With topological 1, design 7, design 2, some of the indicators, not the 30. We didn't need to use the 30. And they, for instance, this is mean built environment. This is in Portuguese, I'm sorry. This is from a Portuguese presentation. So what I'm saying is that mobility is explained by the built environment. And the built environment, I can try this relationship, mediation relationships, is explaining accessibility, and at the time is explaining mobility. Yeah. This is attitudes, psychosociology stuff. So I believe that the environment is important, yes or no, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, things like that. So it's a confirmatory approach. It's very powerful. I just came, to be honest, 2 years ago, I never heard of this. It's something I discovered recently, and I really like, because you can explain a statistical model with a drawing. So it's very powerful. And so in a way, what we did with this was we wanted to confirm this mediator role of accessibility. So it was important in terms of scientific outcome, saying the built environment explains accessibility and in turn explains mobility. It's not a right kind of a direct only effect. Another paper that we actually, this one just been published, is that we wanted to explain the importance of the destination. And we said, what about we're going to calculate, this in English, so it's easier for you to understand. We wanted to explain just walking behavior, so just people that walked to their work or school. So we used everybody that had a work or a school. And we calculated the built environment of work and of home. And in the end, what we found out is that home explains nothing, but the destination explains something. All right, so this for us was very important. Of course, it's just a case. This is for Santarém. We need to now expand and use in other cases, but it's important as a result. Right? So finally, I'm going to shut up. The toolbox is available if you want to use it. We want, of course, we didn't develop with the purpose of making a kind of a public tool. It was just a kind of for us. But in the end, I said, well, this is important. This is interesting. We can put it online. And so some people are using it. It's available here in our website. It's also available in the ArcGIS database, whatever. They have a place where you can put the stuff. And what were the main weaknesses? ArcGIS is a stupid thing. It is not really a 64-bit software. And you can make it be 64-bit, doing what they call the background processing. So you can use like a foreground processing or background processing. So there's a plugin that I've installed in ArcGIS, and it becomes 64-bit. I don't know if it becomes, but it says it does. In the background. The problem is that with Model Builder, you're doing everything in the foreground. You cannot, if you use Model Builder, you cannot say, put it in the background. So it becomes a bit slow. One tool in particular, the design tool, becomes quite slow. It took like an hour to do one city. The other ones are very fast. So I would say it wasn't that problem. Future, what we wanted to do, but we didn't have time or staff. We wanted to integrate in a single tool. We understand that there are lots of different tools that make different indicators. Ideally, you should have one, and the user could say, I want to calculate this and that, and like just check boxes. And well, we couldn't do that with Model Builder. We have to convert it to Python, and then in Python, it's possible to do. Didn't have time. And yeah, so a single tool and simplified method is the same thing. So in a way, like just the one big tool that you can use. Okay, and that's it. Thank you. Está a funcionar?
Sim.
Okay.
Okay, who has questions for the
Yeah.
That was the weights.
Yes. They're all standardized weights. Yes, go.
They are determined by.
They are all. I hope you guys know a little bit of statistics. I didn't know your level of statistics. That's why I just put this. I didn't waste a lot of time on this, but I can explain. It's very easy. So here, what you say is that if you put, the other one is better. Has more different stuff. So these are all standardized weights. They all vary between 1 and -1. Yeah, they don't get. So it's the beta. When you put when you have the famous statistics, you can use the B or the beta. So these are only betas because you want to see if they are important or not. For instance, here, this is the for this paper in particular. The important thing that we've discovered is this. So I can waste a little time to explain this. What do we say? These four variables, these two are correlated. It's common, as you know, in built environment. You have more diversity and you have more design somehow. So it's good. It's a good method statistically because you can incorporate the correlations. You don't have to discard one of the variables because it's correlated to the other. So you can incorporate that. And they say, well, this variable, built environment, which is what we call a latent variable, is something that you cannot measure with one variable, but it's explained with these four, right? And this is the amount of explanation. And there's another part that you cannot explain, there are errors. That's why it's called E. E1, 2, 3, all the variables, there's an error. And then the structural part is this one, and they say the built environment of the work explains 0.94 of the accessibility of the workplace. So 0.94, as you know, it's a lot. It's quite a lot, yeah? And the accessibility to the workplace explains 0.56 of the walking behavior. This variable, I can explain 0.69 of it with my model. So it's a good model in the end, yeah? And then over there, there's I mean, I'm not going to waste time, but those numbers are important to show that the model is robust, okay? I mean, I need a lot of time to explain those numbers, yeah? So, but the important thing is that you can look at the arrows and see the numbers. And so it's easy to understand if you were explaining or not. It's easy. You waste like a month or two and you end up learning this. I mean, for me, wasting a month or two to learn yeah, this is, there are several softwares. I used one that is called Amos, that is a part of SPSS. So when you buy, here in the faculty, we have it. There's an open source version, but it doesn't draw. Because in the background, what we have is lots of formulas. For each arrow is a formula, if you want, yeah? So you can write the formulas, the open source software, you can write the formulas, but then in the end, it's bad, but yeah. So yeah, no open source, I'm sorry. It's quite robust. I mean, it's often for us, I don't know what type of work you do, but we have all these different variables you want to put in a kind of a basket to see what comes out of it. Yes, it's all exported in, I believe it's XML. So I think it's XML, I'm not sure, but you can export and import for other softwares. So in that sense, yeah, it's not proprietary files. Right? It's good. And the only thing that you need to have a theory before. That's why I spent a little bit of time in the beginning to explain how we saw the theory. So it's not an exploratory statistics where you put variables and start digging them down. You have to have a theory and say, this is connected to this and this, and then you draw how you think. So it's very good in that sense. Right? Yes.
How small can be your model?
I have no idea, but the problem here, I forgot to tell, the problem is you need big data. You need at least 30 individuals for each variable you're going to use. So you can only use this if you have big samples. If you have a small sample, you cannot do a structural equation modeling. No, yes, you have, but I'm not sure how many. I mean, I'm not an expert on this. Yeah, I'm just, I feel confident at the moment doing this, but you know, I don't teach this. Yeah. I don't teach this. But it's very powerful. If you have around, I would say, for instance, in our case, we had 450, yeah, that model says 450 people. So this is explaining, I forgot to tell, we made a travel survey in the 4 cities, and we end up having around 1,000 individuals in each city. So the total sample was 4,000 and something individuals. And this is only for Santarém, so it's only 1,000, and only workers. So that's why it's only 400 people, because we had a lot of people that didn't work, so we couldn't use it in this model. In the other model, in this one, well, I don't have it here, but we have 4,000 people here behind the model, because we're using all the cities, everybody, so just explaining mobility as a whole, not homework mobility, yeah, commuting. So if you have a big sample, or if you're planning on having big samples, and my experience is that 10 years ago when I've made my PhD, well, more than, 10, so I'm becoming old. Almost 15 years when I started, and I had to make my data collection. It was really hard to get data. It was hard. Time flies very fast. And I did a travel survey, and it was really, really hard. We had to go to the streets and make questionnaires, and I had to pay from my pocket to my students, help me collect data and everything. And nowadays, I've made a travel survey 2 months ago in December here for all the students and professors of University of Lisbon. It cost me 0. To be honest, I involved my students. I teach in the 5th year transportation field. They were very enthusiastic, designing the questionnaire and everything. And we have a sample of 2,200 people or something. So it's today, my advice is, most of you are students, don't be afraid. It's easy to get data. The problem normally is what to do with the data. So don't be, if you're planning to do surveys, it's easy, more than we think. We can use, technology is very helpful. We get very big data easily.
Yeah. You said didn't have the routes, maybe instead of questionnaire app.
Yeah,
Phone,
I made a proposal for the FCT that invited the Zenunu, but we didn't win it. And last year, and we wanted to make an application that you can use in your smartphone. Indeed, Google knows where you are at the moment. Yeah. Any of you that has an Android in your pocket, Google knows your life, even if they know your life. What we wanted to do is just to collect that data with the written consent of the people. So they say, okay, do you want to make part of this travel survey? For instance, I would ask you and say, okay, so for a week, we wanted to collect weekdays and weekends. Well, Google didn't get this, didn't want this. Yeah, but we could. There's different. You don't even have to write an app from scratch, because there's lots of apps for running or cycling that they collect GPS data. So we can just, based on their application, use the information with the written consent of the people. And what we wanted to do is that in the end of the day, I will send you an email saying that this was your day, and you went from here to there. And because I know there is university, I assume this is your work. And then you went there, and there is a swimming pool, so you went for a swim, whatever. But you can validate it. That was our idea. In the end of the day, you get kind of your record, and you say, this was for fun. I went to pick up my children. So we have kind of more detail. The problem here is exactly as you said. We had the travel survey, but we didn't know which route they used. And we tried to make kind of what's the characteristics of the routes around this area, but we didn't manage to do anything with that either.
Yeah. Just that was because I was talking a couple of months ago with Susadora. He was trying to ask me if I knew an app to store this information.
Yeah.
And he suggested, why you didn't ask maybe the faculty to provide a multi-purpose application, like to access the data of the student from the mobile phone,
Yeah.
and also that application that store the data. I mean, it's really useful because actually you're using the application as a student.
Mm-hmm.
And also can store the data. Also, you have to ask for your read. But the application you proposed was like a multi-purpose application, was just to collect the data.
Well, at the time was because it wasn't only for students. Yeah, what I had in my mind was an application to help with travel surveys. And to be honest, I end up finding out 4 or 5 applications that already exist. One is in Dutch. You cannot understand the word, but it's done. Well, Jose can, I don't. And I sent them an email, and they were very interested. They said, well, if we go ahead with this, do you think we can collaborate? And they say, yeah, of course. In a way, they would give us to translate and to try to validate. The problem of this is it's always the data that you're using. For instance, American applications, they all use Google, like WalkScore that we were talking about. Here in Portugal, if you end up using Google, for instance, if you calculate WalkScore in Lisbon, your results are not very good. So I end up... It's not precise. There's lots of things missing, especially in terms of land use, the activities data, points of interest. So my heart goes always to OpenStreetMap. Say, well, why don't let's do something in OpenStreetMap? Because if you do something in OpenStreetMap, just give me the map and the app is there. And the problem again in Lisbon is that you find areas, for instance, in the city center of Lisbon, you have a lot of information, but if you go to the suburbs, there is none. You don't. So the municipalities are not, because what happens in the States, I believe you know, is that municipalities are feeding OpenStreetMap. So it's not individuals as us. Here in Portugal, it's often we that, during weekends or something, we're going to draw our girlfriend's house or our house or whatever, yeah? Or put stuff. This is a coffee. So we like to feed the system. And so what I think it has to do, we have to do here in Portugal is make municipalities feed the OpenStreetMap, because it's I truly believe it's the future. And then you have to have a app that goes into OpenStreetMap.
I was thinking just the application download the GPS tracking.
Yeah.
And the analysis is done in other places.
Yes.
I think it's possible to cross data from different sources. Once
Yes.
you have the GPS. I don't know if it's possible to collect the data, but I've done something with the Foursquare. Foursquare is a
Foursquare, yeah.
Foursquare gives you a lot of information, not for all the places.
Yeah.
But if you like running analysis by yourself without sharing,
Yeah.
I think it's possible.
Yes, it is. You can also, I mean, if you want points of interest, you can access the TonTon dataset.
Okay.
So TonTon is very good. It's 4 GB of information for Europe, and then I think it's 6. If you have ArcGIS, people don't know that, but if you have ArcGIS, to be honest, I didn't know as well. I just found out because I like to work with other softwares that is not ArcGIS. I end up working a lot because of this project, and as I was telling you, the other guys didn't know other software, so okay, let's use ArcGIS. But the thing is, when you buy the license, you buy a lot of information as well. I mean, you don't buy information, you buy access to the information. And if you go to this website that is called my.esri.com, you are able to download a lot of information. And one of the things that they have is the points of interest of TonTon. So it's a very good data set. And I've downloaded Europe. It's 4 GB of information, but if you start looking at Portugal, they have a lot of things. And for me, when I do research, I'm always, to be honest, I'm more concerned about replicability than accuracy. And I'm going to explain. Of course, we are interested in accuracy, but if you start being very paranoid about that, you don't do any analysis. You say, well, I know that my coffee next to my house is not here. And you go there and put the data, right? So in the end, you don't do anything. So I prefer to say, when I write a paper, I said, I use TonTon dataset version 10.3. And then if the guy says, well, but that dataset is not good. Okay, then give me another dataset, and I do my analysis again. Yeah, because when I was your age, to be honest, I lost a lot of time doing data collection because you said, well, I want to be precise. And then time flies, yeah? 6 months go by, yeah? And you don't do any analysis because you're just doing the data collection. So now I'm getting white hair, and I said, no, I don't do data collection. I do analysis, and I use the data as it is. So you have to be precise and very sincere about the limitations of your data and the data that you use. And so if somebody is doing that, great. I'm totally for OpenStreetMap, but if I don't have an OpenStreetMap, if I'm studying an area and OpenStreetMap is very poor, okay, then I'm saying I'm not going to use OpenStreetMap. I use other type of data. Yeah? But honestly, and I tell this to my students, don't waste a lot of time in data collection in the field. If you're doing, for instance, travel surveys, of course, you need the data because there's no data available. You need to know where people are going. So spend your time there in thinking in statistics or whatever. Because the data, and then do these type of models, because if you have this, that's the good thing about doing a toolbox or whatever, is that when new data arrives, you just replace and run it again. And you have new indicators. Right? Next. Right. You want to stand up, or you want to be standing, or you want to sit? Okay.
Okay, so I have called my presentation like computational methods for the built environment. However, more precisely, it's going to be about me and the computational methods for the built environment that I have been using in the last years of my studies and the work experience. So starting a little bit about me is, I come from Lithuania, and that's where I have studied my bachelor's, and I studied my bachelor's in architecture and urbanism in Vilnius Gediminas Technical University, and I also did 1 year in Italy, in Florence. Afterwards, I was working for a year as an architect, back to my hometown, and then I decided that working as an architect is kind of not enough for me. That's not what I really want to do, and that's, yeah, there are other things that I'm better at than just designing and drawing things. And so I went to the Netherlands to study geomatics engineering in the TU Delft. And I'm quite accustomed to the question of what's geomatics engineering. So geomatics engineering is all kinds of spatial data collection, management, and analysis methods, which are meant both for relatively small-scale projects, such as like big stadiums or indoor skiing centers or any kind of like really huge buildings, as well as for mapping the whole planet and dealing with the climate issues, both for the built environment and both for the natural environment. And after that, I was working in a research still in TU Delft, and now I came here. So I'll try to, now I'll present you 3 of my most recent projects very quickly, which I have done all in the TU Delft, so Rhythm on the Campus, Runnability Index, and the Pigeon project, and I will explain you later what all of them mean. And I will start with the first one, which is the Rhythm on the Campus, which is a synthesis project. Synthesis is something that we do in Delft before the thesis. It's basically like a thesis, except that you do it with 5 people and in 2 months. The project of our synthesis was spatial monitoring of the campus usage patterns using passive Wi-Fi scanners. The idea is quite simple. It's based on the fact that now we all have some kind of devices which have Wi-Fi, and if we have some scanners which are able to track the Wi-Fi signals, we can locate where people are in the campus, and based on that, have the ground truth data for analyzing of how people use the campus buildings and how to migrate from one building to another, which spaces are occupied at which time of the day, and similar things. So it works. The system seems like a very simple system because what it does, it simply tracks the Wi-Fi signals that are sent by our devices and sends all the signals into the database, registering the MAC address of the device, the time when it was tracked, when it was noticed, and the signal strength, and a few more attributes. So yeah, it seems all quite simple, and we have located a system of Wi-Fi scanners all over the campus of TU Delft. To do that, however, there are certain problems that we, of course, face, is that things that, of course, not necessarily everybody has one device with him at all times. There might be people who have like 3 devices, there might be people with no devices at all, or the devices that are not constantly connected to Wi-Fi, that are connected at some time and then at another point disconnect. And then there are also problems that if we have all the devices placed inside the building, then part of the outside area can also be covered by the scanner device, but this is not actually what we want to know, who is passing by the building. We want to know who is inside the building at some certain point. So that's where all the challenge came, that we have a lot of data, but we have to somehow filter out all of that data that we need. So for example, find out all the static devices and delete them out. Such things as like printers, which are also using Wi-Fi in TU Delft, routers, and all the different kind of devices. Then all the devices, all the data that has been collected without purpose in the nighttime, because the devices were on, but the buildings are off. The buildings are closed, but there are still some devices for some reason detected from the night. These had to be filtered out. And the hardest part was to actually find out what is outside, what is inside, because in some cases it's really hard to tell philosophically what is outside of the building, actually, in some cases? Is it like here, for example, in these two buildings, the outside of the building, is it the outside or is it the inside still? So these cases also happen in our campus, and we had to use a lot of statistical pattern recognition methods and observations and system tweaking in order to find out what is outside and filter that data out. And even if we have all the filtered out data, the final step is to say that, okay, this was the number of devices that we have tracked, so what is the number of people? And to do that, we also had, we did some kind of manual survey.
Just a quick question. You were triangulating the position with several scanners?
Yes, in a few of the buildings, we had two buildings which were like our main focus area, which was the library and the aula, the biggest auditorium of the faculty, which are together. In these months, we were trying to track people, also triangulating to find out where they are. But the main purpose was actually not to find out how they move inside the building, because this is anyway not very precise and not very.
The position was decided by the use of the several scanners. You decided it was in.
Yes, it was, but this was more of a byproduct, because the bigger purpose was to have many scanners in many different buildings and to be able to see how people move in between the buildings rather than how they move inside the building. Because for inside the building, as we have found out, Wi-Fi is just not precise enough. It sometimes can locate you like on the ground floor, and in a second you happen to be on the 5th floor. No, that's just not possible. But it was really possible, what was actually possible, to locate how people move in between the buildings in the campus, because the distances between the buildings are quite big. And because all the campus in TU Delta is concentrated in one area, it's possible to say, okay, now somebody was in the Faculty of Architecture, then somebody was in the Faculty of Aerospace, and afterwards they went to eat in auditorium, then afterwards they went to the library, and afterwards disappeared. So this kind of things could be tracked and could be monitored within the building. And it was also possible to tell by also just pure statistics, by translating the number of devices into the number of people, of how many people are in some certain building at a certain point of time. So for example, we had an online dashboard, interactive online dashboard, which would show these things in almost real time with half an hour of delay, because of all the processing and data transfers that were going. So to say that, for example, okay, in the library, now the library is very occupied, the auditorium is almost empty, the 3ME faculty is very much occupied, and all these things, and like architecture faculty is completely empty right now. And this is why this is important to know, is like one thing is for the research interest, that we are able to do these things, but in general, it's also for the university to be able to know that at some certain times of the day, one faculty is like completely occupied while the other one is completely empty. And then later in the afternoon, it changes. So why do we have two faculties? Maybe we can just merge the facilities and have one. Or in some certain points, like during the exam period, the library gets so crowded, so overfull, like really full, that maybe at some points, then some hours of the day, so we had to find at which hours of the day, it makes sense to open another building and to let students to go study in that other building instead of just trying to fit into the library, which is not possible anymore. So these were the reasons, and then we can also we could make a lot of kind of different, draw different patterns on how these things happen and see how people move from one place to another. That somebody like from other faculties, they go a lot into the library. From the Faculty of Architecture, almost nobody goes to the library. So, well, there are reasons for that. Yeah, so this was a project, and I think one of the things what was worth mentioning here is that it was presented in the Agile conference, which was here in Lisbon. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come here to Lisbon, because last summer it was really nice in here. That's this project. Now the next project is my most beloved one, the Runnability Index, which is my master thesis. And my master thesis relies on the idea that I wanted to provide but I thought that it makes sense to provide some kind of critique to the walkability index, the walk score that we have mentioned a lot here. But because what it tends to actually explain, the walkability index, is that transit-oriented walking. So it's purely for transit purposes. But there's really another kind of walking which is only for recreational purposes. And that provides completely different patterns and should be, I think, what I thought, that's what I wanted to prove, that it should be calculated using different kind of measures. And because it's not the same whether you have to get out of the area, because there is no other way to get out of it because it's so constrained for car usage or things like this. And it's the other thing when you are at home and you think, oh, I will go around, I will run around, because the area is nice for that. And that's why I want to go outside, because the area attracts the recreational activities, attracts being outside and walking in it, running and things like that. So yeah, as a contradiction to the walkability index, I tried to provide something like that I called the runnability index. And for that, I have used to have the ground truth data to validate it. I have used data from the mobile sports tracking application from Endomondo in my case, because Endomondo is good for that, that it has all the workouts which are publicly accessible. It has a website from which it's possible to write an API and to track all the data down. It's not very efficient because it also takes, it's the same problem that Stefano has mentioned, but it takes like ages and ages because you have to send one HTML request, then it sends it back, then it's like 1 second per one, and then you find out that that track was something completely useless. So it takes quite a long time, but the problem is that they cannot provide the data themselves because of privacy issues. So yes, this was the ground truth data that I had, and then in order to calculate to provide the network and to calculate the measures to try to define what is the runnability index, I had the data from the satellite images from the Landsat, which is like has a worldwide coverage, the European coverage very bit. The Eurostat, the data that provided by the European Commission, which has the land use data for all the cities, and the OpenStreetMap. And another thing that was that I was trying to pose as a critique to the walkability index, that it usually works like it's raster based. It's not network based usually, because well, some concession, not always, but it usually states that if the area is walkable, or so then if the area is walkable, then basically every street is walkable. It's not more about the fact that in a network, it might happen that there is like a very walkable street and another street is like really drivable street, and this is okay. They are more trying to say that, okay, this area is walkable, so it's okay. And yeah, so for that reason, I was trying to make not a raster-based, not a buffer-based population, but a network-based population, and just to save for the space for a single street or park or pathway, how much this is runnable or walkable in that case, but not considering the whole area in general. And well, I used, in order to compare these things, I used kind of the same measures. So the land use mix, the street connectivity, residential density, and the greenness, which is not always included into the walkability index, but for the runnability, I thought that it really makes sense to include it. And for the whole network, I calculated these measures for every single space in the city, in 3 different cities, actually, to make sure that this is like repeatable in all cases. So yeah, land use mix, the street connectivity, the residential density, and the greenness. And then combining all these things and trying to find out also doing some kind of multivariate analysis to find out how they prove the most of the correlation with the existing data. And this is what I got for the city of Valencia, for example, as a runnability index, and this is the actual case. It looks like it shows some kind of correlation, but actually doesn't. Well, visually it kind of shows, but numerically the correlation is not there. And this is just a proof, I would say, just a proof that the same measures as used for walkability are really not the same as what you can use to explain the recreational travel patterns. So it needs, of course, much more investigation, much more research still to be put in that, but that's maybe for the future. And the last project is we call it Pigeon project. It's the last one that I did in TFL before coming here. And well, this project had 2 parts of research, basically 2 focuses, which were all merged into one kind of function. And one part of it was a rapid simulation of natural ventilation in big sports buildings. So in our case, we had a swimming pool in China as a case study in Wuhan University, and design optimization based on the natural ventilation of the sports buildings. And all of these had to be integrated into the early design stages in order to find out what kind of configuration, what kind of shape of a building is the most favorable in order to have the most sustainable, the least energy use wasted on ventilation. And I'll also incorporate it together with a multidisciplinary optimization, saying that, okay, if it's very good for if it uses very little energy for the ventilation, maybe then it uses too much energy for the daylight, or maybe it uses too many materials, so the cost becomes impossible, or maybe it's just aesthetically not very pleasing. So there were two ways. One way is, not two ways, two parts of the research. One part of the research focusing really on how to simulate that natural ventilation very quickly and not using the safety analysis, which takes like really, really long. But if we want to have like 500 simulations, 500 different buildings, and we cannot afford the CFD, we have to find a quicker way. And on the other hand, how to do this optimization in a multidisciplinary way and to make sure that all the criteria are satisfied, that not only the ventilation itself. And why do we call it a pigeon project? Well, because it ended up as a Grasshopper plugin, and because Grasshopper plugins always have some kind of animal name, so and this one is about ventilation, so like about a building and like something inside, so we called it pigeon.
How just what you use it as something like that, but you did the plugin, how is it?
That,
about this plugin. I
Yeah.
know that you create some, you create some scriptions, you know, with
Yes.
Python and Cypress.
Yes,
But you use some.
for optimization.
Yeah.
No, for optimization, we had a Mode Frontier software, which is an external software. And well, I will come to it in a few slides. I will explain. Well, anyway, the plugin is like, this is just the very start of the plugin. It's not finished yet. It's still under development. And before it can be really released as a real plugin for somebody to use, it needs a lot of explicit testing and seeing how it works, because otherwise if we release it and then people start bombing us with emails of asking, why does this thing not work? Why does this thing not work? So we try to avoid it. And this is still work in progress kind of. And so yeah, so it consists of these two parts. One part is the simulation of natural ventilation. So what it does is that we have a conceptual model or parametric model with defined parameters. However, the architect defines that. We simplify it, then we define it into different thermal zones, and the plugin was able to divide it into airflow zones, then send out both of these models straight into the model for Energy Plus and another model for content software. Get these models back and then calibrate them based on each other until they reach the convergence. And whenever the convergence is reached, we can calculate the comfort levels in every single zone. And based on that, we get the performance values on how the comfort levels are supported, well, justified in this way. And this is our small loop and the big loop. And afterwards, this kind of simulation goes into the big loop, where we have that parametric model, which later is like translated into this Energy Plus and the content software, and then any kind of other performance analysis, whatever we want. In our case, we use daylight, and we use the surface area, which can provide enough where we can place the photovoltaics in order to get enough sunlight generated energy, and also the cost of the building. And then afterwards, these performance values are evaluated and sent into Mode Frontier, which is the optimization software, external software. And on the other side, they are sent into the database and all saved in the database, so that afterwards we can, instead of saying, okay, we have looked into all of these 500 different simulations, and the best of our 500 is this. Okay, let's use this. So this is not the way to go. And for that, what we have is the last part of the plugin is like some kind of dashboard, Grasshopper-based dashboard, which is able to explore all the possibilities that we have just tested and simulated in order to find out, to maybe make some kind of clustering or self-organizing maps or any kind of different kind of multivariate analysis, in order to tell that, okay, if we go this direction, it's better for this. If we go this direction, it's better for this. There might be some kind of combination of features that make it more optimal for this and this and this, but then it's really bad for that. And in some cases, we also have to, of course, look at the geometries to say that, okay, this looks like a very optimal solution in all the numeric values, but it's really ugly. So maybe that's not good. Its architectural aesthetics is also very important. So in the end, it's more about, not about saying that this is the optimal, but it's more about saying, okay, we have all these possibilities, and out of all these possibilities, we have to sacrifice this and this for that, or maybe not sacrifice this, but try to focus on this because it's good for this and so to allow a little bit more of a human intelligence to be involved into this optimization part, into the optimization itself. Yes, and that's it. That's,
Okay. Does anyone have questions? I have a lot of questions.
Can I just have a quick question about your runnability index? What is, I didn't really get what's the main difference. I mean, I totally agree with your criticism that walkability is very much into transit-oriented walking, so like it's, yeah. So people walking kind of not a recreational walk. So you wanted to make a kind of a physical activity ability in a sense. What was, I didn't really get what's the major difference in terms of the components of the index.
the components, well, it was more about when I had, well, because it was a master's thesis, so I could not do that.
Okay,
It was a,
you got really good results, yeah? So
yeah,
try to
well,
understand what's the difference between what did you put.
yeah, well, the thing is that in the beginning, my ambition was to really create the whole index on its own. But after I realized how much time it takes to get the ground truth data, to construct the API, to construct the urban space network, which was like really the bottleneck of the whole project. So just to get the network out of the data, and I used OpenStreetMap is not good enough for that. I had the whole big procedure on how just to get the network. Then in the end, what I managed to do was basically to only prove that if we use it the same way as for the walkability index, then it will not work. So it's actually, it has almost exactly the same ingredients as the walkability index, except the only thing is that walkability index says that land use mix is very important. So for runnability index, of course, logically, the land use mix cannot be that important as for like transit-oriented walking. So one only thing that I used was the recreational and residential. So the mix between the like parks, rivers, all the squares, and this and the residential. So that in order that we have the industrial area, then it doesn't matter how many shops it has. This is really not a place for the high runnability index. For the street connectivity, I also used all kinds of space index analysis in order to find out that maybe one of them is or the between us or the centrality or something is able to give better results than just the connectivity, the number of streets in the area. But so actually what I used was the between us centrality, which showed a little bit better results, but still not good enough. And the greenness. Greenness was something that doesn't always go into the walkability index, but I thought that it's really important. Yes, it's taken from the Landsat images. So I just check how many check the pixels because it's 30.30 meters. So I can check the vegetation, the NDVI of the average NDVI per street. Segment.
What are the major differences when you define the urban space network? I mean, as I could understand, there are some details about the network that need to be fine-tuned, and in particular in this picture, it shows that you are considering, especially in the green areas, the representation, so the network is extended somehow, comparing with the traditional representation of what would be just a transit network.
Yes.
So let's say in methodological terms, what would be the steps that you take to get to this network?
Yeah, the thing is why I couldn't use a street network, because, well, obviously the things like parks would never fall into the street network. So that's why I use the OpenStreetMap, because it has all the really like the smallest pathways. Well, it depends on which country you take, but I had 3 case studies, so Gothenburg, Valencia, and Vilnius. And for Gothenburg, then really you have every single path marked there. It's like really, really nice. But if you take something like Valencia, well, Valencia is still kind of okay, but Vilnius, I think, was especially particularly bad, where it really didn't had a big lack of streets even. And also it's very hard to use it because then it has also like car lanes, and then for the car lane it has like 4 car lanes. But the thing is that for the person who is running, then none of them are relevant. The only thing is that maybe he's running by the side of the street, so you only have to have like 1 street for that. So in order to overcome all these issues, and I was also using the land use data provided by the European Union, the European Commission, which has the polygon of all the roads. So what I did, I buffered all the OpenStreetMap segments, edges, whatever they were showing, and I combined the polygons together, and afterwards extracted the center line of that polygon, so that at least per street, I would have one path, and then wherever there was whenever there was something in the parks, then if there were like 5 edges shown just because somebody decided to draw like every single tile there, then they would also just merge into one. And yes, and then in that case, I get something like that. I didn't go very much here into details of that because this is really not a perfect way to construct the network. It has like here, this place looks very, very nice, but in some cases it gets like really weird when in OpenStreetMap you suddenly get a lot of random lines drawn in random directions. And
yeah, the reason why I was asking this is related with the comment that David made a while ago about understanding exactly the replicability of the research. So, what would be, let's say, the steps to take to really replicate what you did in other places? I believe that is probably one of the most important issues in this particular research, because it's the first step is where you create a representational model, and the rest are basically measurements that you get out of the representation model. It means, again, the question of assumptions and what you assume to design the representation model, to define the representation model, somehow produces a particular kind of final results when you measure them, because you get a different network. Yeah, that part I still think it should be probably more tested and really clarified.
yeah.
Are you developing more too at the moment, or? I mean, I just didn't get you what are you doing at home? You told us about the past.
Oh, I just came here 2 weeks ago.
I'll explain that. Anyway,
But this is, I mean, to be honest, this is a very good subject to be further developed.
Yes.
There's lots of criticism.
Yes.
There's a lot trying to find new indexes. For example, I work a lot with the University of Porto, from physical activity department, so sports. And they do a lot of, that's why I started collaborating with them, because they do a lot of these neighborhoods analysis. They end up using walkability index from Frank, the typical 4 things, and not so much walk score. But then in the end, they all get this problem, exactly as you were saying, that you're trying to explain physical activity of adolescents, for instance. They do a lot of work with adolescents. They have a lot of interesting data. They work with accelerometers. They give accelerometers to kids. They travel around, and GPS devices and so they have a lot of data, and they don't know what to do with it. That's so they knock at my door and say, "Well, what can we do with this?" We have really good data, but the problem is that they're trying to make relationships from physical activity with indicators that in the end are, as you said, and I agree with you, very much designed to explain utilitarian walking, not so much physical activity. So I believe that, going in this, I don't know if I would call it runnability, to be honest, because you don't really need to run, you just have to.
No, it's just a
just a
different name.
But trying to understand, to develop an indicator could be very interesting. Maybe even if you work in a group here, people, guys that know how to program a lot, and people that know more about collecting data from the web. I think it's a really good starting point to try to develop a new score.
For this kind of activity, maybe what is lacking is the data.
Is it
Using road network is for global things. If you start to look at the activity of the quality of space, public space, you end up needing the sidewalks. And the detail of it. You have a large space, you have to know where people can walk and not. So it's not enough for those networks.
No.
At least at the moment,
But the problem
they are
is
designing both pedestrian networks, so they became aware of this problem.
But
And partly because I told them, you cannot use this data, so now they are designing and the sidewalks, yeah, road crossings and everything. So it's gonna take a lot of time, but they are doing it. So as I told you before, if they do it and they have only one neighborhood, good, let's do it in the 10th neighborhood. Don't be, we can't be with our arms crossed waiting for the entire city. So just use, it's like you were saying, in Vilnius, the data was very bad, but
In Gothenburg, in
Gothenburg
Sweden,
was
it
great.
was
So
like-
let's do it
Let's do
in
Gothenburg.
Sweden with Swedish data.
In some places, I can suggest that we can help the OpenStreetMap community.
Yeah,
I
and ask them
know
to do it. Yeah.
we can help doing, we promote in Portugal regularly mapping parties.
Yeah.
So sometimes what is like this division, we need a
So that's what they are earthquake in.
so it's basically maybe it's easy to just call 10 guys or do it. So if you leave the we can maybe promote it as a launch from the we know that no achievement we can do.
No, but
That's probably the length is the best practice. Not inside the city, lanes are done, separate lanes are done in the highway. If you when there is physical separation, it's
Yeah.
stupid to do it just because of navigation apps.
no, but also because it's provided by people. So sometimes people decide to draw something that is completely not relevant, like the.
But the advantage of OpenStreetMap, you can go in and check.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, it's true.
And okay, we cannot correct Portugal in one day, but we can, if you are using the area of Lisbon, you can do it in 1 month or in 1 week. It's possible, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Okay. We have done small villages in 1 weekend, completely. It's doable. And I'm in contact with,
Victor is a major player of OpenStreet.
because we have an association, I'm the president this year, and we promote conferences and we promote mapping parties. So we have a list, mailing list with 400 people that go around that. So it's easy to call for help and try to get some. And we have from engineers, so if there is a question about, okay, how we can use this data, then we can ask for it. Have the guys that use it every day give us and with ideas or with some of them are even colleagues from the academia and they are doing masters OpenStreetMap as a subject. So sometimes we can suggest something that they can do to improve the software.
Okay. Just one comment about the last project, the Pigeon project. I was thinking when you developed the conceptual model. Well, this is always I'm always looking at the first representation. And whatever you decide when you define that first representation determines a lot of the results that you have
Yes.
at the end. Anyway, I think it's a good way to leave something open for human decision, and that is a good decision in the whole system, definitely. But a lot of what you get in the end is very much defined already in the conceptual model. It means that we're talking about a tool that can be used in the conceptual stage, but it's not really helping defining the concept, right? It can validate the concept rather than helping define it.
I would say it can support the decision making
Yeah.
in case that you have the concept, but the concept says, okay, our roof has to go this way, but you are not really sure whether it has to go like this way, or like that, or maybe the roof can be like a little bit rotated. Like when you have, of course, it's up to the architect in a way to define the whole concept and to say that the tool will not never say that, okay, the best building in here will be something like this and this and this and that. It's anyway up to the architect to define how many possibilities we have to change it, how many parameters. And it's, of course, this is not something that you can use for saying, now we can calculate how much mechanics or mechanical ventilation we need for that. This is only in order to advise. It's only good enough to advise you to say that, okay, if you do a building like a roof like this, it's going to be terrible for ventilation or it's going to be terrible for daylight. But for this, it's going to be a little bit better. But in the end, anyway, you need engineers and much more complicated calculations to say that now to achieve this, we have to use this. So just for the initial stage to support your decision.
But still, some concept has to be, let's say, sketched before that.
Yes,
You test
certainly.
that concept and kind of fine tune the concept and progress to another stage.
Yes. It's more for fine tuning the concept than for. Also, because if you give the model too loose, like you say, we have tried it with like 18 different parameters, and then for each of the 18 parameters, we get like 10 different variations of them. In the end, we have such a model that it's not possible to run enough simulations to test all the possibilities. So it has to be quite defined, and then we can only say that this way is better than the other way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it runs all the simulation. And optimization. Well, actually, what my idea was that optimization in this case is something a little bit wrong to do, because optimization in the end tries to lead you into the optimal result, but in such an initial stage, it's nicer to do the sampling and to find out what are all your possibilities, and then to put a little bit more of a human brain to say that we go this direction, or we completely disregard these ways because these ways were bad for performance values, instead of relying completely on the what optimization gave, because optimization is something that it doesn't account for everything. As you see, it only accounts for the things that you ask it for.
Yeah.
You cannot trust it completely.
Yes, I agree completely.
That's yeah. So yeah, maybe. Yes, exactly.
Okay, just before we move to Liliana, I will just explain very briefly what Rusne is doing here. We basically, I opened a call for a grant. I was trying to find someone to help me finishing some of the tools that I started. Not just my tools, also what Liliana has been developing with me. And so we have a lot of unfinished work. Certainly, there were things that were waiting on the shelf. So last year I didn't use my budget for traveling. So I basically applied that money for a grant. And I defined a lot of requisites for the skills that I wanted, to. And Rusnet, filled up all the skills. So it was from 3 people that applied. She's here starting. She started 2 weeks ago, and she will be here for 6 months, so until August. And the plan is to have those tools ready and to have, let's say, a pack of tools applicable in parametric urbanism, including a set of analysis tools. And we hope to have it finished by that time. I would also like to convince Rusne until then to start her PhD. But we'll see about that. Anyway, it depends on the kind of, let's say, dynamics that we can get in the group. But of course, it's up to you. Okay, so Liliana will be the next.
Yeah, sure. Should I do something or should it appear? Yeah. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of my current stage of my PhD thesis, which is titled Urban Architectural Emptiness, Riverside, Lisbon. And it's a multidimensional approach towards user-based classification of public spaces. And my research is based on hypothesis actually that we can see and capture urban voids, and therefrom everything starts. So this phenomenon is approached by Gestalt theory and by neuroscience, and I kind of relied on my experience, my idea, and I supported it by theories that already exist. So I started thinking how we can actually capture and maybe visualize emptiness in a way that we can understand them better. And my idea also was that I should look into the space searching for user-based approach, and not only seeing it from architectural and urban point of view. Thus, I did kind of survey, not kind of, but survey directed to user, asking them what do they expect from open public spaces, and I obtained a large matrix of imperatives or spatial qualities that people are looking for. So I made categorization of those. They are basically divided into two big subdivisions: human level imperatives and geographical assembly level imperatives. The upper one, they contain behavioral and emotional category, and the lower network, geographical, natural, urban architectural, and equipment. So this was the world that I was looking at, but trying to do analysis on urban voids. So, okay, going forward. I understood in a moment that this is too big to be approached during my PhD thesis. Thus, I wanted to concentrate only the thing that we actually can work with, like that architects and urban planners are working with. So I minus network analysis because I thought that I was not going to have enough time. Thus, I concentrate on geographical and natural, urban architectural, and equipment category. And I'm going to. So I understood that this is my main subject because this is the thing that they are working with, and that we are making tools making tools, and understanding should be most profound in this category. And then that there should always be that kind of understanding, comprehension of relation that architectural and urban category has to geographical and natural one, and also equipment one, which is kind of filling up properties of urban architectural category. So this is more or less conceptual matrix. I observe open public space as a place. Okay, I make distinction between open public space and then place in, so we can talk about it in more local level. Now I will call it place, and it has various properties as or spatial imperatives that we look at. some of those, like spaciousness, diversity, and light and color or materiality, are properties that belong to the place itself, to the place when we are inside it, or yeah. And then openness and naturalness, I codify as properties that belong to limits of that space. When we go there, when we look at the place of on a wider view yeah, we see that there is its relation that it established with landscape, and in that way it shows some properties which are exposure, amplitude, and extension that I'm going to show you in a while. So going back to my matrix, I didn't think about imageability and healthiness. As you see, on the geographic and natural category, I concentrate on natural advantage and heritage. Okay, and then on urban architectural, I concentrate on all, minus on materiality, because materiality is something that it is so obviously quality of built and not of unbuilt, and finally on equipment. So first category, geographic and natural. I did the analysis of kind of every place is implemented in a certain landscape, and relation place has it with its landscape is understood is very important for morphology of the place. And so the first thing I did is try to understand how this is the basis for open or urban voids to arise, kind of a landscape that they are inserted on. So this property called exposure. And then we have places that are like on the hills, that are overexposed or inclined, or when they're in a flat landscape. And this is the properties that other authors call a ruggedness, kind of shape of the rug. And then, okay. It has to do also with distance of our horizon that we have from certain place, and so on. And then based on that, I saw that from each place, open voids or emptiness, they expand depending on the limits that place has, but also on that kind of landscape that they are made in. So I defined two major characteristics, or yeah, one is expansion that has to do with the size of the view that we have from certain place. And for this measure, I use isolists, and it is, I mean, I made up new property, because what is usually used to show this is area of isolists. But I thought that it is not enough, because it is not only area of view that we can capture, but also the shape of that view. Because if view is kind of round, it is different than if it is long and narrow. So that is therefrom I have two properties. One is expansion that accounts for area, but then also compactness of isolist, and then extension that accounts for perimeter and also compactness, that show how deep our view is. And those two are shown to be very important and apprehension of space.
Those are two types of shape factor.
Yeah.
Compactness is isoperimetric.
Is what?
It's the relation to a circle.
Yeah, it is given already. Yeah. Both of these area and the compactness are given by isolists and population. I just combined two, and then everything.
The only thing is that I was asking is because you should look into the literature, because I'm sure you will find this already.
I looked. There is nothing that it is. I found people, for example, talking about area, yes, but not about roundness of that view. And then talking about jaggedness, which is kind of that if it is has a lot of
Yeah.
but
that is the first property of jaggedness.
yeah,
Okay.
it's yes,
So
it's kind of.
You should relate with what is already there.
No, I
And
get.
in any case, we find a lot of things
basically from geometry and from fractals, also from, for instance, the interpretation of fractals in nature, like for calculating the fractal dimension of certain objects, of certain geometries. You will find already some stuff on them. And you should at least try to correlate with those first, because then you can define the difference, at least in terms of interpretation.
I did that work. I did it. I did it. I mean, I have written. I have theory behind. I only didn't show it here. Yes.
We will discuss that.
Yes, I can say. And this is also important because if we consider that we have from sea level a circle that human eye can capture 4.8 kilometers, more or less. And then that is also important because it is at that distance, person starts to perceive horizon. So there are places. My case of study is Riverside, Lisbon. There are places like Belém where we actually get to that limit of visual expansion. So we get to horizon, to perception of horizon. Okay, that is one of important just notion. Further, when I entered into the place, and based on survey that I did and literature review, obviously I define these four properties that I think are important, which is openness, naturalness, diversity, and spaciousness. Where first two, openness and naturalness are qualities of limits, and diversity and spaciousness are qualities of space itself. In order to capture those, we developed a tool, which is a convex and solid voids model that tries to codify three-dimensional information from built environment and to turn it into solid voids. It kind of solidify emptiness, urban voids, in a way so we can see it, and it's kind of diagram that we can use in further analysis. And the first level of model is convex voids, which is the smallest fragments that we can find in urban or urban architectural space. We accounted for three-dimensional limits, but also for changes in height. Whenever idea is actually based on one of also neuroscientists finding that our brain makes, whenever we move to the space, it makes kind of map, cognitive map. So, and there are cells in brain cells that are correlated with limits. So whenever we approach spatial limits, there are cells that are triggered. So perception of limits is very intrinsic to human beings. So that's one of my starting points. And then we defined convex spaces as basis for our model. Those convex spaces are three-dimensional. They account for surrounding buildings. And then we start thinking that actually in an urban environment there is never voids are continuous. They are not broken, even though we certainly experience differences in when we pass from smaller to larger space, from street to street cross, but they're anyhow continuous. So we developed next model, or we made next step, which is agglomeration of those into solid voids. So solid voids are spaces that are still, they have a rhythm, but they're still together enough to be understood as a unity. For that, we use visual angular deviation. Thus, all of spaces that are still within 30 degrees of visual deviation are still seen to be one. Okay.
And then on the end, in order to understand my equipment category or category when we are looking only within the space, we are now trying to develop the next model, which is fragmented voids, which accounts not only for buildings, but also for changing in pavements and other things that are important in comprehension and usage of open public space. This is how we calculate, how we codify our built environment into convex voids. So we have facades that are around convex space. So we do kind of everything of that information. It is also based on idea that our perception of space on the short term is very abstracted. It doesn't account for all the details that the environment actually has. Only further experience of the space starts bringing the details about materiality, about other qualities. But first impression is very abstract. So if human perception of space is abstracted, then maybe the model that tries to capture that perception can be abstracted also. Okay. Then we have some correction factors. Okay. This is the way we construct solid voids. Solid voids or agglomeration of convex voids. And there is interesting correlation between perceptual theory in our work. When they want to analyze vision, they usually talk about scene. So scene is something that we can kind of, there is a view that is small part or portion of what we see, and then several views are linked into scene. And so that these solid voids would be in a way, can be translated into kind of scenes that we can see at once. And they have several views that we pass through in order to experience space as whole. Okay, this is some example of riverside solid void. Not in totality, because actually this is more than one. Okay, then going further, we analyzed openness of spatial limits, and it started very basic. How many of limits of some space are closed? How many of those are enclosed? And we get to know what percentage is open or closed. And then we are trying to do that for three-dimensional also. Okay, and then about the diversity, for example, I was thinking diversity of open space, diversity of voids of open space can be very interesting. Property to look at. For example, if we see this is Ribeira dos Naus. Let's say if you are recognizing it, yeah. This is small space, and then it comes into bigger, and then even bigger, and then ends in this one that is more narrow. So in our theory, these two actually is made of two small convex voids, but that are joined together because they have affinity, and then they are understood as one. And then we did the same for other spaces. This is Poço do Bispo. I'm saying if you can see it, this is actually Doca, this place where water is. This is building where they change pneus. And then, okay, so this one has a lot of convex voids, and then solid voids tend to agglomerate in different ways. So what I want to say with this, I want to say that in traditional or more compact spaces, we see that agglomeration tends to be easier, and that spaces do not overlap that much. When we see Poço do Bispo, we see a lot of first of all, places are bigger. They are not that defined. They are spacious. Their openness is bigger because they have less limits. And then the solid voids they tend to overlap one with each other. And then I was looking, for example, how many convex voids in total one space has, how many of those, how many solid voids they have, what is the area of convex voids and what is the area of solid void, because that gives me that percentage of overlapping, gives me that percentage of ambiguity of certain space, because when space is well defined, there is no overlapping. When we have, for example, space that has, we can see it from one side and then we can see it from the other, there is a space in between that is overlapped. So that's what I wanted to capture. And by diversity, I think number of convex space, number of solid voids, all that. Oops. Okay, that is diversity. And then spaciousness. Spaciousness has to do with height of surrounding buildings and area of buildings. It is as simple as that. For now we have values. We still have to look in more detail into those values, so we have to compare them with reality, so we can find some benchmarks. Okay, and on the end, fragmented voids, actually voids, solid voids when we enter into them. And I'm still about to develop this, but idea, to draw this, but idea is to account for more elements that we can find inside the space, and then to talk about all these factors: openness, naturalness, diversity, and spaciousness, but having in mind those inside the properties. Because, for example, if we have inside the space that we at the first moment we saw as empty, we see that there is a grass inside, that there is a bush, there are bushes. We can actually naturalness of that space changes. Diversity also, we have a lot of different payments and other elements. Diversity is different than if it was plain. Okay, that's it.
Okay, I guess that you probably have a lot of questions. I'm sure you have, because I have a lot of stuff to pinpoint in detail, okay? So I will start with that. Probably I can answer some of your questions, and then I will leave the questions for later. I would say that Liliana is one of the best students that we have here for branding stuff.
For branding.
Yes. She's perfect, picking up names for properties of things and interpretations of things. She's really great doing that. But I would actually prefer, and it would be even, let's say, safer for your research, to use a lot more already known things, meaning that instead of coming up with new attributes, and in many cases you're actually picking up attributes that are already available in the literature, but you're giving them different interpretations, using the same name. For instance, the term spaciousness has been used many times, but you're using it in a particular way.
Yeah.
And this is true for spaciousness and probably all the other terms that you use. This creates a huge difficulty for your research, which is you have to prove all your attributes, while you could be using other attributes that already have a way to be calculated, already have some meaning, they were created for some purpose. Then you just reinterpret that same property within different contexts. Mm-hmm. And that's different. Okay. So I would advise you to be a lot more careful with this, coming up continuously with new terms.
I'm not.
We talked about this.
Yeah, but I'm not coming anymore. I know but properties, for example, naturalness, exposure. I found them in literature. They are just I use the name and I explain how do I use it and what if there is a difference. What is the difference? For example, expand exposure. It's called ruggedness. I preferred it. Yeah.
We'll then see everything in detail. This is just a general comment.
Okay.
But I think there is still this problem. The reason why I asked you about the use of the ISOVIS for the views is basically because it is related to this. I mean, the use of the fractal dimension of shapes of the view shape is probably one of the ways that you have to evaluate that. And you just need to look into already existing literature and put it in the context of the global context of your research.
Okay.
That makes it a lot easier. Upon that, means that the overall research, which is very ambitious, we also talked about this, divides two different kinds of worlds in terms of calculation of attributes. Some attributes are related with, let's say, basic measurements of the built environment. Other attributes are perceptual attributes or attributes based on the perception of the built environment. So these need to be separated because in the end, what you want to know is what can I manipulate in terms of the shape of the built environment in order to, let's say, produce some result in terms of the perception of the built environment. So to have in the end results that allow you to correlate, let's say, design possibilities with perceptual possibilities, it means that you really need to clearly separate what is one kind of property from the other kind of properties. These are two different worlds that in the end you're going to correlate. But it needs to be clearly separated in the beginning so that after a while from evidence that you extract from the case studies, you can establish some kind of correlation. Otherwise, it's completely dispersed. Okay. Another thing is, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to find someone to help me and you finish these tools about convex voids and solid voids, and is to have someone focusing on testing these tools, clarifying a lot of things that are still unclear.
Yeah.
I told you a few times that you're giving a step ahead because you haven't given enough proof that all this theory about convex voids and solid voids is really producing what you're already saying it did. And also the method to produce these representation models, we could say it is replicable in a more or less traditional formal urban tissue, but it doesn't really apply that clearly to more abstract kinds of spaces. And you're also having that difficulty with the riverside spaces. There's always questions about these spaces. And before we have that absolutely consolidated, you're already bringing the fragmented voids, which is an interesting concept, to look into more closely into the space and how the elements within the space interfere with the perceived space. This is very interesting, but in my viewpoint, it should start from from the solid voids, not from the convex voids. It should start from the solid voids because we already tested it enough to understand that the solid void corresponds to a kind of perceived urban element, like squares or streets, things that usually are perceived as single urban spaces. And for that reason, it should be the starting point. But to have that as a starting point, we need to have this method to reach the solid void model very consistent. Okay? So it needs to be tested. Rusne is already doing some work on that, and she's going to try to develop more models in different areas of Lisbon. So the first thing is give her some cartography with information from Lisbon, so that she can develop new models and test it further. And we should then have some meetings and discuss this on a regular basis. And then, after having some solid voids defined, then we should look into the fragmented void models, because that's another thing, and that's another scale of analysis. Okay? So the theory for a larger scale of analysis should not be the same for an inside view, okay? Because there are issues related with a different scale of approach.
Theory is one, actually.
I'm sure there are a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, my idea is to be able to look at space from various scales, and it is what occurs in reality. We are kind of.
I mean, you are already doing things which I believe are quite correct. You're classifying themes of analysis, okay? Different themes of approach, and that's the important thing, because then you kind of separate thematically the possibilities in terms of analysis, and you can address the meanings of those themes, kind of as individual packages. Later we can put them together, but it's actually, let's say, a typical way of working in science. To validate something, you set up your focus. You focus on a particular set of meaningful things. You validate those. Then you study others, separately. Then when you put them together, you might have some conflicts between things, and other issues might come up. But you need to grow up progressively. The only problem here is that it means that you're still, trying to go in many diverse directions.
I'm not. It looks like.
But at least
I will tell
you need to validate, the initial aspect.
Yeah.
Go to that slide where you have the possibility. That one, yeah. On that slide, you have another thing, which is a graph.
Yeah,
Okay?
because
And that means that there is another type of analysis that you probably can run there, and you didn't.
it is, but I don't want to run it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I just
But
wanted
I'm
to.
sure there is also a meaning for that. The only thing is, there's so much
No,
that
it is
you're
for
just
diversity.
leaving on the side and jumping to other.
No, I'm not
So-
leaving, because I acknowledge that I want to measure openness, naturalness, diversity, spaciousness, and I want to see how those
Well, first you need to
diversity.
define them very,
Yeah.
very accurate.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say this is a moment where you need to write a glossary of terms.
Yeah.
Very accurate.
Just difficulty. When you are doing this, you are putting aside completely the green trees.
No, I'm not. Hmm?
No, she's not.
In the voids.
She's not.
I don't see the.
No, I
for
have-
instance, let's see, the industrial.
Yeah, because I have two.
Just to think about, you cannot just have in consideration with the facades of the buildings, you have to enter with the volumes and
Yeah, that's why I
that
have.
doesn't exist in the maps. That's a difficult.
That's why she wants to go into the fragmented voids to look inside spaces.
At some
What
point,
is their populating
will
space?
have to put our area in this. We have to have some kind of 3D scan of the environment to have a map of the obstructions that are
Yeah, I
large
know, I
enough
know.
to be a problem.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
If you
yeah,
have
yeah.
a small tree, no problem. Like here, if you go outside, you have small trees and this doesn't give you a problem because you obstruct, they are small enough not to see them. But if you have a very large area with 50-year trees, in fact, they are the limit. The void is between the trees, not between the buildings.
Yeah, that's why I came to like. That's why I wanted to do these fragmented voids because
That's something that you have to obstruct.
But for mapping that, it's you have there is how how to map in 3D the trees. For
yes,
instance.
yes, yes. I mean, for me it was a problem because trees. I always wanted to see what trees or whichever element it is. It can be kiosk or something. It's always separate, dividing space into smaller spaces. It's kind of dividing big room into smaller open rooms. So that's why fragmented voids. That's how it started because I found need to understand space in more detail. And for example, when we talk about like Terreiro do Passo, it has 3 facades that are constructed, and then have one that is river.
It's easy because it's open.
It's open, but it's also natural. It is different. I mean, it is very. We make a big distinction between built and unbuilt natural things in the perception of reality. So it's all. When I talk about naturalness of solid void, it accounts also for what kind of facade it is. If it is natural, which is a projection of our view on that facade. If we see forest, it is different than if we see city there.
Yes, I understand, but my difficulty is more practical. Is how do you apply this to a city where there is no data about that?
Apply a building theory now. I will see that later.
In Lisbon, that's not Lisbon.
Yeah.
Where are that obstructions?
No, we have to draw.
But that's the reason why, well,
Because they are, you cannot
two
ignore
issues.
it because
First, if we consider the obstruction defined by trees in the same way that we consider the obstruction defined by facades, then we have no useful information about how to design the space, public space. So it seems more useful to understand first what should be the representation of the built environment in terms of, construction. What is the generally taken as the definition of it? Yeah, and then the effect of having other elements within the space, like the role of trees. There is for instance, a good example, the street in Camporim, in that street, we have a lot of trees that actually create a kind of ceiling in the street. If we cut the trees from the street, it's still the same street, but the perception is completely different. So the first representation model should be the one that represents the street shaped from the buildings, and then something within this street changes the perception of the street. And to understand the effect that these other elements that we put in space really interfere with the perception of the space. We need to have the two situations represented as different things and understand how one changes the other.
Engineering is working for another PhD to do this survey automatically.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I agree with that.
who's.
I agree with that.
Survey that in a fast way, so we can gather data.
Yeah. What I think is that Liliana is really providing a lot of themes for a lot of PhDs. So I'm trying to make her focus on a single PhD.
Encourage people
yeah.
to come.
Yeah.
No, but my focus is these four qualities, and then how they are changed when we see things from inside. For example, naturalness is changed. We have trees or grass, and then spaciousness also, because other things diminish spaciousness. And then how these four relate when we look on the contextual scale. If we open endless view, its spaciousness obviously is different, and so that's it. So simple. Yes, but now I will do the cleaning of concepts.
We'll have to schedule a meeting for detailed discussions on this.
Okay.
Just one final comment about this research. I think that this field, these concepts of convex voids, solid voids, and fragmented voids is an entirely new line of research, which has, loads of stuff to do, really a lot of work to do. For instance, fragmented voids will be looking at a more local scale, but there's a lot of stuff to do there, and you'll be the one, to do it first. So there's something there very useful, and I'm sure there will be a lot to add to that. And the idea of convex voids and solid voids need to be first, because the fragmented voids will start from solid voids. But we can see the use of solid voids in another direction, which is a larger scale. We can consider a lot of solid voids together, which build up a network. Then we can talk about the properties of these networks. And this is an entire line of research again. And there's a lot of work for a lot of people.
Just a short comment about
Please.
I think there is a difficulty here because most of the research on this area, computational, is focused on density, on networks, etc. So I think it's quite innovative, the quest of open space and its metrics, its perception, and it's relatively new to computation in general terms. One thing about it, it's not only about built environment, but it is also about landscape and territory in general. So it's more than just built environment, I think.
Yeah, it is.
My perception. So what I think you need to be more, it's more systematic in your research. That's very difficult. It's very broad. The themes are difficult. The concepts are quite new. So yes, I agree with you need to be careful with it.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I just ask you one thing? Can you go back to the slides when you evaluate I think it was the exposure.
Exposure.
That one. What happens when you have going down the hill?
It's combined. It's combined. No, this is this descriptive measure. So if I have 3 or 5 types, yeah, it's as simple as that. It's combination of these.
Okay. João. Last but not least. penso metodologicamente que vai ser um processo mais rápido. Claro, e mas pronto, eu não sei se locais depois os próprios funcionamento do espaço, função em grupos, como é que se grupam, movimentos,
Windows P. Okay. Está. So, may I? May I? Posso? May I?
Ok, João.
Hello, my name is João Ventura, and I'm a PhD candidate, but I'm from Isqueté, but I'm connected to the group by Professor Beirão, and I'm presenting a methodology that would be midway. My PhD is in the middle, something like this. Well, probably I should have more work done, but I'm going to present what I have done so far based on a presentation that I made in last EKD. And it's called Data Mining-Based Methodology for the Multidimensional Study of Public Open Spaces. And I call it the Foursquare, but this is something that I invented 2 weeks ago or something like this. But I'm going to make some introduction. Well, this is a methodology for analysis of and classification of public open spaces, and starts by focusing on the formal square, the square that we know from the historic city mainly, and that is accepted as individualizable urban element, that I accept the square as is. I don't normally, in many of the literature, there is open space or public open space, but there is no square as it's street in general. But well, I start by accepting that, and I collect contributes from disciplines of urban morphology and site analysis, and try to synchronically, this is in a time slice only, and multidimensionally characterize and classify these urban spaces. Well, I try to resort to multivariate statistic analysis and inductive pattern search techniques in large data sets by data mining. And we have our corpus that is a set of 126 Portuguese squares that were already studied by Professor Dias Coelho here from Urbis Lab, former Urbis Lab from the map of Rome, yes. And it was published in 2007, and we have access to the digital basis of that publication and of that work, and we are trying to analyze this corpus is mainly analyzed through the school of urban morphology, the Italian school, more with historical and architectural approach. We have our main research hypothesis that, well, that only by simultaneously consideration of a heterogeneous set of characteristics, we may reveal some public space identity as unsuspected familiarities between them, and at the same time giving the human limitation to apprehend spaces or problems in more than 3 or 4 dimensions. These computational methods of data mining, combined with spatial analysis and algorithmic design, can make a major contribution to urban morphology and design, and eventually promote a better integration between these disciplines and several disciplines of urban morphology. We have such 3 objectives in the research. We have to design an original multidimensional inductive method for the characterization and classification of public open spaces, and try to gather descriptive and structural approaches to urban form in a single process, and to relate morphological features with measurable quality and performance attributes of urban space by data mining and machine learning techniques, supervised in this case, and to conceive an urban design approach based on these concepts and workflows that would take advantage of this analytical method that we are trying to implement. Some background here, we have a quotation by Serra, Chile, and Pinho that bring the shortcomings of traditional typomorphological analysis as reported in the literature. So it's very time consuming, relative opacity and subjectivity, and very context dependent, and has some questionable reproducibility or generalization. So, some other approaches try to escape the limitation of some uni or bivariate analysis by classifying examples in some multivariate 3 or quadrangular plots. As in this case, we have on the left space matrix, density theory that make that kind of regular plots, and Stephen Marshall plots on his street and patterns from street networks, street patterns. But we are trying to use more powerful models and tools that's supported by data mining, and that is an interdisciplinary subfield of computer science, but you probably all know that. Well, and this data mining in general has 2 main objectives. One would be prediction, the classification of unknown cases and regression, and the discovery of new knowledge in data, finding unknown patterns in data through a kind of bottom-up approach or something like this. Among the numerous methods implemented in data mining, we tend to start by exploring the 2 of the most established and simple, probably for starters. There is to try to principal component analysis and clustering with kappa means, kappa modoids, or something like this, because there are a lot of models in this approach. So we are trying to test with this first. And it's a learning process at the same time that I'm going to. Just 2 examples from principal component analysis applied to architecture morphology. Here by Shanana is plotting analysis on graph of, I think it's spectral graph analysis of the plants with I think all line map of the plants, and he finds some in his plotting from the 2 components, the spaces then this author points out there are some regularities here, that there are some clustering around the program. This is habitation or use, and some chronology regularity from left to right. And clustering, we have Just some examples of what is clustering. Normally there's a partitioning clustering, or there is starts having the space of examples, or hierarchical clustering, that we can say that it records all the way as the clusters are built. It starts from the example and go up. We can make several kinds of clustering as long as we go up. And at the scale in vertical, it represents the difference. We have two examples that were utilized here, like Gil Yotras and Beirão. It's also from that is mapping the examples of blocks and streets in Expo area in Lisbon, and some and in the right some the voice of the interior blocks of a neighborhood in Athens by Anna Lascari. He's comparing also several methods of clustering. Well, some information about the corpus. You probably know this publication. It's a 4-volume, and they were selected because they represent well, they are a significant set of samples in the context of Portugal mainland, and we have the set of the publication basis, and the publication and the information that is available is very comprehensible, and it has a systematic representation. It's very consistent, and it's updated. It's from and already has some historical and morphological analysis on it. These are just examples of the information that we have access to. The main thing would be that there is a simplified 3D mass model from which we can extract some 3D parameters, but there is no formal or there is no spatial or formal data quantified. So this is our task. This publication is accompanied by a multimedia medium that allows the exploration of existing graphical information and even its comparison, but it's in a purely visual way. You know, one of the outputs will be to add a comprehensive set of additional layers of information to it, analytical model layers. Well, so we have to resort to a set of tools and methodologies that go from urban morphology, you know, algorithmic design, GIS, database, and data mining fields. So, to put it just in the realm of urban morphology, we have what is pointed in the literature. Normally, it's the lack of contact between the several schools of thought of this main field. That it's almost everything that is concerned with urban studies, you know, or even from the point of view of its shape, of its form, or its shape. Well, here we have to combine several approaches. So the corpus came from a school. We have applied other schools over the corpus, so we have a mixed approach of this. And from algorithmic design, we are, well, this is unknown to you, so you are here. No, it's just that we are taking use of the fact that algorithmic design can add a deeper level of abstraction in the creative process, and make use of its interactive 3D nature and rule-based approach, and that integration flexibility. We can promote the synchronization of between analysis, representation, and design. And that way, try to take use of the methods of analysis proposed and try to, in some way, implement it in design. I don't know exactly how. Actually, we are using mainly visual scripting from the well-known Rhino Grasshopper interface. Also some GIS, namely quantum GIS. We are trying to associate with PostGRIS and PostGIS, spatial relational databases, and We are using it to explore some data, open data repositories, and to make some virtual surveys also, and to streamline the creation of database and the tables maintenance, and and try to use zero references information and to do some mapping also. Well, it's just an example of the use of George G. Lucille Space Syntax Toolkit for that way we can make some space syntax analysis and can be conducted inside QGIS. It's very practical. And well, this is some segment analysis on with the radius 20 kilometers on the Portuguese major road central lines. Well, a shapefile that I find. And they are always also plotted the locations of the squares. And for data mining and in multidimensional analysis, we are resorting to RapidMiner. It's a popular data mining software. That's such as Grasshopper is based on patterns, no, that kind of little elements that make a task and a visual programming interface. And here we can see, for instance, data mining applied to data mining. It's interesting. It's a recommendation operation system. So we are constructing an algorithm and is recommending you the next step based on the collecting experience in the web. Well, for static analysis, we have to make initial assumptions. So we have to make some scale and boundary definitions, so you can adapt the characteristic representation and the spatial scale of each attribute. So we'll try to make an approach with several scales at the same time. So we have 5 operative categories or boundaries of space aggregation, and we start with one that it's the strict boundary of the square by the projection of its facades, as simple as it could be, and through increasingly wider contexts even to territorial boundaries and national boundaries, so where we can depict some and collect some sociocultural attributes that with reference to differences regional and national scale, so we can mix all together. And from the attributes, the definition of attributes, we have 8 themes. That was based mainly in literature review and some experience on working in the architecture and urban design. First, we have a void shape. It's mainly starting analyzing the square as a polygon, and we have some geometric and ratios and shape factors from the shape of the vertical plane and permeability. So you can use some 3-dimensional expression of the space perimeter and the facades, and as their behavior as interface between public and private, the openings and something else. And some urban ratios and densities that are related with the square area with the surrounding blocks and buildings, quantity, built area, and footprint. And it's focused on the density measures based on the space matrix theory. And visibility and connectivity. According to 3 perspectives, one would be the distribution of the connectivity along the square perimeter. Yeah, that means the intervisibility of the facades. And 2, made standard VGA analysis by some neighborhood boundary and aggregating only the values of the points inside the square perimeter. And 3, the visibility from the exterior of the squares through the calculation of externalities of its overlapping area. Now, there would be a criteria here, but some criteria I'm not quite know exactly how to apply them. And some urban system, that would be the attributes that are focused on the global characteristics of the urban system in which the square is embedded. So we extract some syntactic values of the axial lines that cross the square. global and local, and some geometric characteristics, some lengths and angles between them. And use an appropriation, so we can classify the buildings adjacent to the square into some classes according to their uses, and register the existence of exceptional buildings and characteristic elements of the urban squares, like fountains, steps, pilaries, kiosks, and something like this. And some environmental attributes that would be related with the existence of natural elements and other environmental features just as the visible sky area, solar orientation, shadow areas, or topographic slope. And these two kinds of attributes are related to urban quality potential, but they will have to be interpreted in the specific context. And finally, some generic labels that are essentially attributes related to geographic factor and territorial distribution, or some a priori classification that we can make over the square or the space, some labeling. Then with correlation, we can test with the data by these techniques. These attributes are a lot of them, so I hope in the next time I can to shrink this amount of attributes, but try to keep the themes at least. I think the themes are well structural. But the attributes inside each theme have to be optimized probably. So we have to make correlation analysis and to test what statistical aggregations shall we use, the median, the medium. So we have to reduce everything to a number. So to classify the square as a single vector, no single sequence of numbers. So we have to start to modeling the data mining algorithm and try to make some experiments with it. Just some workflows, just how this just include just the preparation of the information, the attribute extraction and table construction, some data mining and data storage in the central database. So we are trying to use also some PostgreSQL database. We have to implement that. So I have to get a little bit more used to it. So we have to have a layer of data visualization, so we can make some critical interpretations and to give to others experts the possibility to analyze what the results are being. And that may influence the initial assumptions, so the transformation of attributes and so on. So this is just for the trying to work around how to build a Postgres database. So how this can be done. If I should do it by square, if I should do it by attribute, if I should do it, there are several ways I can do it. So I have to think a little bit more about it. Just show some algorithms that make to extract some attributes. Some attributes are very direct, like area or something like this. We don't need some special model of the space. Composed attributes like ratios and densities or shape factors even can be constructed from the simple attributes, so they can be constructed inside the database. But some attributes need a more specific modeling of the space. So we describe some algorithms that we implement in Grasshopper. So these kind of algorithms have a poor scalability because they are visual, they are very heavy. So we use them as learning or mock-up devices for testing the models. And if they are promising, they should be developed in high-performance programming languages, like with Python or C or something like this. So some of these models are learning devices for me to learn also about the theories that are behind it. For instance, one that could be used to extract the fractal dimension or the unsolved dimension. This is via Kostov Britain-like process. It's using the slicing it, something like the slicing of a polyline along the perimeter of the square. That it can be used as alternative way of box counting. Okay, it's the standard way to do this, but box counting, at least in Grasshopper, it's much more expensive computationally. So these are the difference between the two ways of measuring the fractal dimension of a shape. No? And they coincide if if they are not mathematical fractals, they coincide these two ways. This is just to collect the characteristics of the connectivity along the borders of a square. This is based on the work of Psar and Brzezinski and Anna Lascari also, that implemented this kind of definition to characterize the shape of a space by the variation of connectivity along its perimeter. It's not there are some measures about how it is going to vary along the perimeter of the space. These are only two examples, but it's in the bottom it's visibility based on a path or something like this. Well, and using only standard components of Grasshopper. This is very simple, but it's just to find the major axis that is inscribed in a shape. So, and the major and minor axis, so the perimeters that could be said of the shape. This is a little of geometry and computational geometry, it's like this, but this could be an attribute that is, and this could be also used to extract some radial dimensions that could be used to generate shape factors and something like that. And this is a isovist. Well, Grasshopper has its own component to make isovist by radial sampling. It's the standard way, making some sampling, 3D sampling. Well, this is, I try to use it, to implement it with pure geometrically fashion, but it's very expensive. It's very, very time consuming, but it's possible to make some use of it pure geometrically. And I'm not using some optimized libraries for geometric calculation and stuff like this, but at the same time, I'm trying to learn about the things. And there are more simples for extract the area of the perimeter of the square, its orientation, and the values of the distribution of the aids, for instance, to assess for the complexity of the shape of the space of the square. And finally, this one that is from extracting the sky view factor for its standard measure from environmental analysis and for solar analysis and something like this, and to calculate radiation through. But here I implemented with standard components. Well, it's just a kind of 3D isovist extracted from an hemispherical surface, so I get percentage values. So the shape of the hemisphere is not important; it's only the factor, so the difference. So in the right, we have mapped some points around the square, the variation of the view sky factor that will be this. But with some theory, it could be another kind of metrics made on Gibson and kind of psychology, environmental psychology, this kind of. So as this is very expensive for, so I try to, for instance, to make some a 2.5D method. That would be simply to rotate the 2D isovists through a matrix of radial planes and to sample the space and to do vertical isovists instead of horizontal isovists, and then to and then we can extract some measures about it. It's not 3D because it's a set of 2D, so I call it 2.5D. But it's based. There is some kind of, in the GIS there is some kind of experiments about this. But normally they use dams, and dams are a kind of solid view from the top, so there is no possibility to model more detailed things. So here you have the possibility to detail things and to make this kind. Well, here we see that we can decompose each isovist by a solid edge against the physical border, an occlusion edge in yellow, it's the standard procedure, and some limiting or hemispherical edge that would represent the sky volt or something. And to expand this kind of analysis to 3D, it's the main investigation branch in space syntax nowadays. That traditionally is only a 2D analysis. No, but my focus is on multi-dimensional analysis. So here, what I represented is a clustering of the properties of these isovists, these 2.5D isovists. I think there are 4 properties that are clustered. And here we define a set of a number of clusters, 4, and for what we could do for this is to characterize each of these clusters. Could be a kind of space that could be characterized verbally, that a space that is, for instance, cluster 2 in green would be something like a larger central space, or in cluster 3 in blue, edge space with good visibility. And this seem more or less clearly, but the other 2 would need a more deeper interpretation of this. Here it's most the same, but the centroid, that would be the archetype, it's marked with a triangle. Well, that would be the central figure of this cluster, so it has the autotypal value of the attributes of that cluster, the mean. These kappa means, and the difference in color, it's the distance to the mean. So, the difference in brightness, the colors are the same. This is with a plugin by Daniel Davis and others that implement clustering with the Euclidean distance function. That could be others, and we normalize the vectors, and then we have this kind of representation. We could do it in rapid miner. Here it's a more complex analysis with 2D VGA analysis of a square, and this is Portas-Moore in Évora. But the initial set were about 24 attributes. Then we made the dimensionality reduction. We had 17, and we mapped we create 4 clusters, where the number of clusters has got to be an heuristics, or it is decided, or we have to follow heuristics that would attend for the explain variation as we are going to changing the number of clusters that is represented in the right. Sorry, there's this. We have to have a way of finding the number, the ideal number of clusters. So it's not an automatic thing. Here we are trying to implement this kind of tools in the squares, with all of that attributes. But here it's only an experiment with some geometrical attributes, maybe 8, of the 2D representation of this ground figure shape. we have the number of clusters are chosen. In this case, we don't make an analysis on the number of clusters, but we choose it only. Examples are mapped here by colors. The mean values are graphed in a parallel plot. The values of the archetype, the cluster archetype of the central are displayed, and the example closest to its center, to archetype, it's highlighted in red. Sorry, I'm trying not to get. I'm going to go stay with no energy. Sorry. Here we have 8 clusters, so you can interpret this. You have 6 clusters, 4 clusters, and on 2 clusters. Well, some measures are very heavy, so like area and the number of islands. So if there is a hole in the space that it's a build. And to help visualize, we try to implement sorry, this should start. It started? No. We try to implement to disentangle the squares, so we try a spring particle system, so it could be using kangaroo, so we could disentangle the squares and to form some physical cluster around the centroid. So there is the central square and the other two. And this works, but I don't know why it's not working. I think it would work now. Well, yes, something like this. Well, this is an example just to help the visualization of the concept. And so there is a central square, and the difference it's mapped to the distance to the center of the cluster, something like this. Well, but in general, this is trying to the whole a diagram of the work that I'm trying to do. Well, I should have done either of these more detailed, as we have always copy, and I never made it. And it's in Portuguese, so. But maybe I don't know if this is a typomorphological. There is a part of a typomorphological classification made from unsupervised learning. This is from bottom up, from clustering and methods like this. But probably would be a part of supervised learning that would be to correlate to these things with some quality measures. No? We have a fixed label for quality. We have the price of something, the price of the land, or something like this, that will indicate that this is, and then try to explain this with the other vectors. No? So this is a supervised learning. Could be made with a lot of, but these are the main things. Well, there are some discussion, but I don't think I'll need to.
Okay.
It's about more about this, and the part would be about the last part, the left part, the classification too. I have to start to work on this kind of indicators of quality. So this, or research.
Okay, I already discussed this presentation with you, so questions for all of you.
Just a quick question more about the database. They have cycles of this data. I didn't see cycles.
Sorry.
They have several.
They have normally they have, but yeah. Na informação que estão, creio que existe, por exemplo, ali está a fonte. But in the plan, there is a plan here in the central I don't know some work.
There is one that is just a porch. That the rain.
There is the sidewalks marked there. Here. Probably can see. No, in this there are sidewalks, but I don't know. No, the middle are perpendicular. These ones but yes, there is. But that's why I'm trying to use the QGIS also because it's very easy to go and see, to put the table of my squares and to click in the table and go to there to see if there is. No, there is no mapping of the. It's a poor. It's a formal analysis of about its origins, all historical about it, and then some architectural features and some architectural plans. That this is the basis of the study.
It includes somewhere the definition of how they reach the limits of the square.
They don't have no definition of that. I have to. I asked the professor. They said that they have no definition.
So they went to the.
And there are some. Well, it's very aesthetical thing, really, because even they put the same representation in the boundary of the square where they are working.
Yeah.
It's a little. Yeah, I asked if they had no clear definition. They have. That's why they put some etching or something like this to.
In worst case, they have more area than it's needed.
Yes, that's. But the definition I'll try to make a. No, there is an assumption that could be made. There is no way. But it have to be an assumption with a theory behind something like this, but it could not be. It's not possible to.
Well, when you explain all the attributes that you're going to, you have the attributes at 5 different scales.
Yeah.
For each scale, there is a record that, let's say, kind of